Russians of Reddit. What is the older generation's opinion on the US? Born after the fall of the US, but both my parents grew up and lived in it. My grandmother was in the siege of Leningrad, and is still alive. There isn't much I can say, but my grandmother says it was overall a tougher time to live. However, it felt more secure than now, and much more secure than right after the fall. The 90s in Russia were a mess and a half, where there basically was no functioning government or police. My parents themselves say that the 90s were so scary that they wonder if that was better during us times. Edit. Grammar and spelling. As you can expect, English is not my first language. Another quick edit. Woke up to an insane amount of upvotes and my first ever awards. So thanks, kind internet friends. I belong to a Siberian ethnic group that faced repression during Stalinist era and after. Plus, a good deal of my family fought against the Soviets during the Civil War. A lot of them died or fled the country. My grandfather grew up in the Gulag and never had a good thing to say about the communists. Like much of the family of his generation, he was branded son of the enemy of the state his whole life and always had difficulties living in the Soviet state. My mother and aunt, on the other hand, grew up when it was much more stable minus food. Utilities and entertainment were plentiful. They listened to rock bands, ate ice cream and watched international films. And a lot of their peers joined organizations like Pioneers and the Party, much to disappointment of my grandfather and his peers. However, 90s in Russia were absolutely savage, especially in Siberia. Normal functions broke down, currency was out of flux, people lost pensions, crime was out of control. My grandmother really missed and lamented the olden times in the 90s. Even though it wasn't as free, there was security, certainty and overall hopefulness. My uncle was killed by a reckless driver in the middle of the day and the police essentially refused to investigate. Grandparents. Dacha was vandalized and burglarized so many times without any concern from authorities, that my mild-mannered university professor grandfather decided to guard it himself with a shotgun and ended up getting one of the guys. My view and that of my family is sued because of the fact that we're a minority ethnic group in Russia. Even though my family has resided in Russia ever since they took over and colonized, even though I held Russian citizenship, ate bread, went to Bonya on Sundays, spoke Russian as first language, native languages were illegal to be taught for a long time, I was never called Russian in Russia, and at times treated rather poorly on that account. Especially when I lived in Moscow, I felt like a foreigner in my own country. I know I'm straying from the original question, but the overall point of this is to illustrate another dimension to the older generation's opinion of us prompt. I hope I didn't drivel. Ushanka show on YouTube covers life in the US. He was born in Ukraine and now lives in the USA. He has an episode about this where he talks about older folks' opinions of the younger generation. It's very interesting hearing his humble opinion, which doesn't seem political at all. More of, oh well, a lot of people didn't think leader was strong, so we weren't sad to see him leave. Oh, and the bread from this city was fantastic. When you hear someone like that talk, it really makes you see past the government and laws they lived under. Edit. Channel link if allowed. https://www.youtube.com/channel/uploadstumfilmkmate. I am born in US in the late 70s. Good way to describe it. It's like a big corporation. It gives you housing, lunches, etc. You work for it. You aren't really supposed to do your own business, because you already work for the corporation. If you do something wrong, others are supposed to give you feedback. Everyone says they are super enthused about the corporation's profits, but in reality they really don't. Also, a lot of people steal. Because who cares? It's some faceless big business. You are not hurting anyone. On the other hand, it's a stable job. You can reasonably expect to work here for the lifetime and advance in your career even if you're really stupid and can't make decisions. As long as you're not annoying the wrong people. In fact, it was a pretty sweet deal for regular people who don't really want to put into much effort. Just do at least some job, and you're all set. Now, a lot of people are pretty buffed about us, many of them rightly so. My family was like not an elite, but it was a working class family where everyone just did their job. It was a pretty shitty family by today's standards, but it wasn't a bad setting for it. Like, we had free housing, free medicine, free education, everyone was pretty happy. If only groceries were also free, that would have been just awesome, and it was expected to happen at one point. What really screwed us over is the 90s. Those were fucking horrible. I was born after us in a post-Soviet Union country. I'm currently in my later 20s and my country has become quite poor after the breakup. Because my country is really poor now, a lot of young and middle-aged people move out to other countries. Russia includes. So there are many old people and not so much young ones. Older generation miss us like nothing else in their life. I bet they would trade their relatives to go back again. One of the problems of us is that they provided everything in your life. House, car, vacations and etc. Leaving only money for food and clothes. So you worked all your life. From your salary they give you a house, vacation, medicine and everything else. Your end of the month salary was just for food and other amenities. You could not save up your money, nor did you learn how to save and use it wisely. So after us fallen, they couldn't possibly adapt. No savings, no experience of living without anything and on your own. So as the result, they miss it. It's a big problem they are going through their life after us. How can you live on your own when for 50 plus years you were under someone's admission and looking over your life and dictating it for you? Now you are abandoned 50 plus years old baby looking for a way to live. Edit. I want to clarify that I generalized my point. I didn't wanted to say everything from outmost poor, nor did I wanted to say from outmost prospering people from us. Everyone had their own problems and upbringing. Some could afford 10 plus years of car waiting. Some didn't had much of opportunity to get a proper apartment. I wanted to tell the story that could touch every aspect of the life in us. And I'm talking from a position after us break up and the aftermath of it. I know about barracks and about more sturdier people that lived, or survived. I just can't say everything in one post. Born and raised in Slovakia, parents grew up with the regime. It was easy as long as you were the type to shut up, mind your own business, and accept the minimum. Everyone had a roof, even though it often leaked. Nobody was hungry, but good luck getting meat without bribing the butcher. Everyone had a job, some the one they chose, others the one they were forced to do. Nobody was jealous of others because everyone had equally as much. Nothing. There were no hard choices about career, what school to go to, whether the housing market was right to buy now, what credit card was the best, or what benefits to choose. These were not options because there was no variety. Everything was uniform and uniformly substandard. Minimum effort for minimum results. But you were fucked if you had dreams, if you were ambitious. The regime ground you down, imprisoned you and slowly killed you if you dared to ask why, or why not this way. If you were different. If you had the wrong background. If your parents happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. If you were one of the unlucky, it was life of imprisonment, persecution, and violence. Both my parents were born and raised in Kazakhstan. My dad's side fled to Germany some time before the collapse, but my mum's side only had the opportunity during the collapse. She only recently told me that when everything started going to shit and all of the smaller countries decided they wanted to become independent states, the Russian government basically dropped the shared currency and introduced their new currency from basically one day to the next. When this happened, they had already booked their flights from their town to Moscow and then from Moscow to Germany, with a day layover. They were very much aware that they didn't have any money to spend in Moscow, but luckily the hotel was paid for by the German government. However, this still left them with the transport from the airport to the hotel. She told me that when they got there, none of the taxis would accept the old currency, even though people who were natives there could have taken the money and exchanged it for new currency without much hassle. They finally found a taxi driver who took them to the hotel and accepted their money, but she also said that he was very tense the whole time because apparently most airport taxis back then were controlled by the mob. Mum told me that before the collapse the US wasn't so bad, if you played your part. Dad's side of the family are, for the most part, still very nostalgic about the good old times, when everyone had a stable job and a simpler life. But I also have to mention that my mum lived in a bigger city in the north close to the Russian border, and had thus access to more amenities and more importantly information, while my dad grew up on a farm in a small village in the far south and his family were largely self-sustaining. Edit. Sorry I spelled Kazakhstan wrong, I grew up speaking German and we write it Kazakhstan. Also it was 12:30 p.m. and I was really tired. Edit 2. I only saw this now. Thank you for my very first award, kind stranger. Subscribe, like and comment if you hate outros, begging you to subscribe, like and comment.